Electricity.
Electricity, right. There was a few. I couldn't remember all of them. And then you indicated some areas, and I think one of them was transportation contract penalties or something like that. But how are you expecting to absorb this additional 561?
That is a good question. We currently, on March 20th, we implemented a budget freeze. So we have frozen spending throughout the district, any non-essential spending. We are currently in the process of doing a significant kind of cleanup audit, going through all of our staffing information to really understand, we're going back and trying to track the churn savings that we have, and we implemented something to do that going forward. For this year specifically, based on where we were last year, it's going to be, there's no doubt it's going to be tight. A big piece of it is going to be the subs. We just processed the sub incentive with the on ARP, so that was 169,000 to help offset a piece of that. We're currently processing the 150,000 that we have for facilities overtime, but we're in a district freeze, and based on kind of where we're at right now, it's going to be tight, but we should be able to absorb the additional by pulling from other places in the district and having a freeze implemented.
All right, so if 2 follow-on questions, if you don't mind.
That's
Leslie?
fair. That's really helpful.
So I guess, what's the risk that you can't do that? And so I'm asking, should this interim request be slightly larger to avoid any risk of not being able to make it? I do get concerned when I hear about freezes on spending, because I don't know what that means for instruction and, trickle-down effect. But why wouldn't you ask for a larger amount?
The goal of this request is to cover the out-of-district tuition program specifically, that we get reimbursed for, essentially, and to keep the scope limited to that purview. It's a straightforward expense. It's a straightforward reimbursement. At the moment, we're still, it's hard for me to answer at the moment, I would say specifically, because we're in the process of cleaning up a lot of stuff, so it's hard for me to give you a totally confident answer. We also have the Human Resources Department working on the current burn rate of subs. We've narrowed the scope significantly to where people are allowed to bring in substitutes. Substitutes is a significant variability. And so I don't have that data specifically at the moment. Based on the current burn rate with the freeze in place, if we get everything cleaned up, I'm hoping that we will be able to cover this deficit as well as the other deficits within the current operating fund. That was the intent of the interim.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm also hearing that your blood pressure may be elevated over these next couple months as you're trying to figure this out.
Dr. Jones might say I've been a little stressed, but
And so then
okay.
my next follow-up question is really for Roland. When you look at the economic conditions report, Roland, I see the excess cost revenue at 900, and Blaise mentioned 967. Is that just a posting issue or a timing issue?
And it would be because we receded 900,000, and we at first, it might be actually though, we receded 900,000 and put 67,000 back in the operating budget, and then that's when Pete called me like 37 seconds later and corrected it. And so I don't know that Natasha has yet actually JV'd.
Okay.
We sent a revised receipt over, but in our report as well, it showed the 900 because the 67 went right into operating. So that it could be that reason. It might not be a rounding error. We only receded 900,000 to revenue and 67,000 to operating expenses. And then we submitted a correction. I don't think Natasha has posted it yet. But that's being moved back. And we met with Pete and Roland and everything on that.
Leslie, any questions? Nisha?
Yeah, thank you. Just thinking about what we approved for fiscal year '23, and I'm sorry these questions are going to be very elementary, but the number of students that you have, 40 for out of district and 49 for tuition settlements. So last year, when you make a budget, do you just do based upon whatever the prior year is? Because, and this looks like to me, and I think we discussed this even at the Board of Ed hearings, where I think, Joe and we were talking about how expensive it is. Some of these numbers are so large. So out of district looks like the average is like 150,000 or so, and tuition settlements are average 50,000 per student. So even a fluctuation of 8 or 10 kids is going to throw your budget off, right? So if you asked, looks like you budgeted 30 kids for out of district and you got 40, please tell me if I'm doing my math wrong, the tuition settlements, you budgeted 60 and you got 50. But, I'm just looking at the math based upon what the budget is. If I just take the approved budget, divide by the number of students. I'm just looking at the approved budget, divide by the number of students. And the question I'm really trying to understand is how do you think about it? Like when you budgeted for fiscal year '24, how do you think about variability? Do you just think of what was the prior year? Do you have some kind of lead, some kind of lead as to how many you're expecting for next year? Because the numbers are so high that a few students can really throw your budget off.
Yeah, I mean, two things to that. What you're seeing where settlements have gone down and outplacements have gone up, that was intentional on Dr. Holly Genthaler moving from settlement because we get no reimbursement if they're sitting on the settlement line. If she can get them in an out-of-district approved school, we actually can apply excess costs for those students. So that really is part of that change, or students that were already with us that shifted lines.
And I'm sorry, how much is the reimbursement for those?
Once we hit that 4.5 times, the state actually calculates that. And as a matter of fact, I believe they're changing the calculation coming out of legislation this year. So, but
What do you mean by that, 4.5 times?
4.5 times the per pupil amount.
Oh,
Yeah, and once we hit that threshold, then we're eligible for excess cost over and above what they expect the district just to absorb. It's very difficult for us because when we build the budget, you're really talking, like when you're looking at this time of the year, it was built 18 months ago. And often for us, we can take all of the knowns that we have, for instance, seniors who are graduating that aren't going to go to Community Connections or need an additional program, we can graduate those students. We can look at students who were new and coming in and add those in. And we calculate an increase in their tuition, just like kind of college tuition, unfortunately, it goes up every year. And then we can look at what has been our trend over time, as far as increases. But other than that, it is often 1, 2, or 3 students. It's generally not 4 extra students. It's 1 student that is a residential placement at $400,000. And if you get 2 of those in 1 year, you're just shy of $1 million. And that really has been the biggest challenge the last couple of years.
You have any questions, Leslie?
No, I just want to explore further the concern that Laura raised, which was the ability for the Board of Ed to come in on budget, given uncertainties that you have between now and the end of the year. And I guess there is a process for approvals coming back to us in May, RTM in June, if you have more information. And let me ask a question to Mr. Geiger. If they missed that timing and they need to come forward to close the year with additional money, have they gone to they can't get approval with the RTM come July, they can from the BET to close the books. But have we run into the issue before?
Because the books are still held open, as of today.
That's true. We haven't closed it officially. But
So
I mean,
we-
if
I
they
guess
could get an
you could get
appropriation
an approval in September.
in September? Okay, I just want to,
And-
I'm not telling you to spend money, but I certainly understand the impact of putting a budget freeze so early. You still have, a good 2.5 months of time to go before the end of the year. So I want to make sure there's an escape valve, if you will, if all your efforts don't prove successful. I think it's tough for us to increase the dollar amount now when you're only asking for the 1.1, but I share your concern with the end of the year number.
So may I just follow on with Roland? Roland, so they could actually come in July and still do it in September? Is that, after they close out the year and see how,
They could do that.
okay.
We've also
So-
done one other thing in the past, and that is they overrun their budget. We've had that happen.
And just plain overrun, that isn't a good idea, though.
No, it's not. but
No, I
it's
wouldn't do
happened.
that. We'd
Ideally,
rather,
we're not doing
we'd
that,
rather
yeah.
wreck your summer,
Yeah.
Blaze.
Yeah. Add it on.
Come in
Yeah.
July.
Okay, no, yeah, I'd rather not do that, so. Yeah, I think for now, we put a lot of thought into it. We need to clean up some of our data, to be quite frank, to answer some of your questions better. So I would say that would be the route to go. would start with this. This is a specific request for a specific purpose. And then we'll clean things up, see how the freeze is going, and go from there.
And you'll be in touch with Roland and Pete anyway,
And work
so
with
we're
Roland
not
and
to
Pete
worry.
closely, yeah.
So I think what I want to do now is separate ED4 from ED5, 6, and 7, which really relate to a different issue. So do I,
I'll make a motion to approve ED4 for $1.1 million of an additional appropriation for special education.
And I'll second it.
and so moved by Leslie, seconded by Nisha. Do you want to do this as routine or non-routine, Leslie?
I would say routine, and if the chair disagrees, he can change it. It's a big number, but it's for issues that we've discussed during the budget hearings.
And Nisha, are you in
I would agree with that, yeah.
agreement? Oh, okay. So those in favor? So that's 400. So now we'll just, I think the other two, we are better grouped, the other three are better grouped together. And so would you explain, if you want to separate them, you can, but I think they all have come from the same issue.
Sure. Yeah, I think let's talk about them all together, and then maybe we submitted them originally as ED5, and then ED6 and 7 being completely independent of 5. And then Roland and I were working together to come up with this logic here before you after we all met. And I think that how Roland has it broken out makes sense. To start at a high, I think we'll start at a high level. Because we have two different pieces. We do want to treat, and I think we've all kind of talked about this already, treating the rebuild of the print shop independent of just building back some of the building, but it's all the same incident. So I'll just repeat some information that most of you are probably familiar with, but we'll just start fresh. On February 4th, 2023, which was a Saturday, a pipe on the upper floor of the Havemeyer building, this says burst, but the correct term would be failed at a coupling. I think Dan is here, and Dan actually might even have it with him. Did you bring it? We've got the actual pipe that failed, the coupling failed. Dan can come on up.
Small pipe.
So it flooded this would have been on the very top floor of Havemeyer. It flooded 2 offices underneath it. It then flooded the entire boardroom, and then flooded the print shop. The areas were heavily damaged, and then all 3 areas contain hazardous materials. They both have asbestos and lead paint, and so they had to be tested, abated. There was a response. The fire department responded, actually, to the flood. The reason that it was detected is because the fire alarm system went off, and the custodian got the call and responded. And what we now have, we've been working very closely with the risk manager, with Megan, on insurance, and we're seeking to do a few things. One is to rebuild, so on the offices, we're rebuilding just part of the office space. The boardroom was gutted down to the studs. The ceiling and floor were both asbestos-containing materials, so both the ceiling and floor had to be removed. And then in the print shop space, same situation, taken down to the studs. The floor, tiles underneath all contained asbestos, as well as the ceiling. So those both had to be abated and removed. And then all the equipment for the print shop had to be abated, is stored in a container shed right now that's behind the building. That was looked at by the insurance company, but without any power. So we're still not clear exactly where the equipment is. We can come back to the equipment, but that is the incident. The piece that specifically failed, do you want to talk about the unit that, it was a cooling unit, and I'll let Dan just explain.
So the unit that failed, we're calling it an HVAC or an air conditioning unit. It's really a chilled air unit. It's simply a unit that the house water, the cold water within the school is brought into a unit that's got some coils, air is blowing across this, creating cooler air. It's got nothing to do with ventilation, and it does not heat the building. This unit was installed over 25 years ago. We don't have any documentation on who did it, when it was done exactly. There was a total of 13 of these units in Havemeyer at one time. We've been slowly taking them out of service and removing them from the building as we added different types of air conditioning systems to the building. This was actually the last unit that was still in the school at the time. It was February, the unit was not on. There was water to the unit. It wasn't valved off, there was no valve to it. And simply what happened is, I'm gonna say poor installation. The solder joint here failed. If you know anything about pipes, there's hardly any solder around it. There is no evidence that this was a freeze. Copper bulges for the, most of the time when there's a freeze or there's a split. This was just an incident of a failed joint. Had nothing to do with the temperature. And I think Blaze covered everything else as far as the damages.
That's the incident. The request, so ED, for some background on the request, and then I think I'll stop after ED5, and then we'll move on to maybe the print shop separately. But the request for ED5 is specifically for it's to cover the initial response, the environmental testing for the hazardous materials and their abatement, and then rebuilding the office space, specifically the boardroom. That room contained all the AV equipment for the board meetings. That also had all of our technology as well in there for the board meetings from communications. And then so rebuilding that space and the furniture for that space. And then on the print shop space, we were in ED5 that is specifically to rebuild a flexible space. It's not being, in this request, it's not being rebuilt as a print shop. At the moment, right now, the space has no floor, ceiling, or walls, and so the current thing is just building a flexible use space. The power won't be specifically aligned for print equipment and stuff. It will be a space that can then be basically used for anything. It happens to be a space that has warehouse capability. It has a drive-in garage door on the back. But there's no funding in ED5 to build that space any further to specify that it's a print shop. That would be ED5. I don't know if we want to stop there. That might, and then before we go in, because I think we'll have a lot more conversation on the actual print shop, and we may come up with some other action we want to do now.
Blaze, also, in the additional information you sent to us?
Yes.
There's something like this, which
Yep.
I forwarded at the time, immediately.
Has a little more breakdown. Leslie had asked for one that
This has a bit more
called
breakdown.
out
I thought.
more specific costs related with the print shop space. It's almost.
I'll take one just so mine looks more like those.
Share then, because
Oh, I have this. I
that's
have,
my copy. Okay, you
I
have
have, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh, that's in the back?
It's in the packet, except
No, it isn't exactly
it
the
should be
same.
one thing
Yeah.
different, which is we
Right.
specifically called out the costs, this is roughly, but the rough cost of that pricing with the print shop space.
That's what I had asked for, and so you
Yes.
came back with it, so.
Yes, Leslie had asked for a little more detail on that print shop space versus the rest. This is kind of how it breaks
I
down.
thought that was something that Joe Kelly wanted. Chair Joe Kelly is with us today, so I wanted to make sure that he got all the information he had requested.
Joe got it too, so. So this is what it looks like. Werner, we have a contract with Werner. The work has begun. It's well underway at the moment. I would say that we're hoping that this would be a very conservative estimate at the moment as they're progressing. I think, knock on wood, things seem to be going very well. So the original estimates we're hoping would be original estimates to the good for this, so that's a good sign. They're only at the elementary phases of the rebuild. We really just have all the stuff abated and gutted, but I believe they began on Monday, yesterday, actually rebuilding some of
Leslie,
the
if I
space.
could ask, I mean, it seems that this portion of the request today is independent of the decisions about the print shop. Do you want to take action on this now, or you want to wait till?
I'm happy to take action on this. I did, are you finished?
I have a few
I mean, I
questions.
want to make sure, I'm happy to take action first, but I want to make sure that everyone has any questions. Laura?
So actually, my question is really for Roland. This is showing as coming from the capital and non-recurring fund, but don't insurance proceeds get deposited into the general fund?
No.
No, if we appropriate out of the capital non-recurring fund, the proceeds will go back into the capital non-recurring.
All right, so what about the items that aren't strictly capital? The flood emergency response, environmental testing?
That'll come out of capital non-recurring as well.
It does, okay. All right, and I just want to clarify, this is considered one event for insurance purposes, correct? So a $100,000 deductible, just
Yes.
one time? Okay, thank you.
Yep. And yeah, we worked after we met with Roland, and the thought was specifically what he just mentioned was to put this specifically in capital, this is really capital. And then we're carrying the whole thing in operating, so when we do the JV for the charges to move them to capital, it would include the whole package.
How you would do it in the private sector too, just, so we consistent.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but just following up on Laura's, the 100,000 deductible is for the event and the equipment itself, right? So whatever this total 800,000 or so that we're seeing here would pay the 100,000 once, and then the balance, both the equipment and the event are covered, or is it just? one of
That's
them?
our understanding, yes.
That's your understanding?
Yes, yep, that's how the whole thing's been treated so far, yeah.
Okay, and I do know that this happened during one of the colder weekends, and I think, Dan, I've heard you say that a few times as well, that the temperature outside didn't really have anything to do with this, and you explained it very well. Is that something, if it were temperature related, would the insurance not have covered it? Is that why we're clarifying that, or?
I think we're clarifying it just as a point to get the right information out there. There was a lot of different stories. I'm not really sure how the insurance would take care of that. I'm sorry.
Right, because I'm just saying pipes freezing and bursting during the winter are very commonplace.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is very commonplace. This unit was internal to the building. I mean, in the middle of the building, and I think the building temperature at the time was probably somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees.
That was going to be my next question, was the building heated over that
Absolutely.
weekend?
Absolutely.
So you said this was also a chiller that was not being utilized, right? Or was?
Correct.
So why was there water flow into it? It was just because we hadn't turned off the
Because
water supply into it?
there were no valves to it.
So that would not enable it to, you need a valve to basically turn the water supply off
Correct.
to the.
That's correct.
So the only way to really take it offline is to just remove it
Correct.
altogether.
Yep.
Okay, and then in terms of getting estimates, you mentioned Warner, I don't know how to pronounce that, Warner Construction. They're the same firm that also did the scaffolding, if I'm remembering correctly, for CMS. Is that the same firm, or? The question I'm really trying to understand is, do you have to, especially in projects that are this large, what are kind of the requirements? Do you have to go out and get 3 estimates, or from an insurance?
Werner is a town identified, I want to call them emergency response contractor, and they were on site that night. So that's why we went to them. They were able to provide pricing for it and proceed quickly on it. They assisted us with getting the materials out of the building as well as doing the rebuilding.
No, I understand why we probably wouldn't, like, this is an emergency, and during emergencies, you can maybe skirt that process, but from a process standpoint, we don't need to get 3 estimates, because Warner, I guess, is the first one on that day. They don't necessarily have to now do the renovation and rebuild. Are you required to go get 3 estimates, or can you bypass that and still be, both from a town process standpoint, which I know we talked about this in the audit side, but from an insurance standpoint, does the insurance carrier require more than 1 estimate?
So far, everything we've done with Megan is fine. We issued a single source contract with Werner under the town as a supplemental to the town's service contract with Werner. And so far,
You're okay with that?
Yeah, Megan hasn't had any. Everything so far has been fine, and I think it's actually come in significantly less than what we were thinking.
Okay, that's good. And then the last point I'll make is this came up at the audit committee meeting. I don't remember if you were there, but we were discussing this with Megan. And I'm forgetting who was there from the Board of Ed, but we did have a discussion on this regarding having a flood, like a monitor from, it looks like it was discussed a few years ago as well, but just in all of our school buildings, just having a simple device. We call it a flood detector, maybe a leak detector, some kind of a sensor, which is relatively inexpensive, just making sure we follow up on that to make sure that, we do institute it not only in Havemeyer, but any other, both town and school side, really. Just making sure, I don't know if you got that information as well.
Yeah, no, thanks. Megan reached out after the audit committee meeting. Dan's team has been putting them, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dan's been, any mechanical work we've been doing, we've been adding the sensors in the mechanical spaces. We recently got a quote to go back and retro the other mechanical spaces with a couple, that don't have them yet with the sensors. And then we're actually meeting, Megan set up a meeting with Luigi, Dan, myself, I can't remember, one other person from the town, and the insurance company for May 5th, I think it is, first week of May, to kind of go over this whole program and to go over what we can do kind of long-term on both town buildings and school buildings to
Yep.
to come up with a solution for this. Do I have that right? Yeah, okay.
I want to continue a little bit on this theme because, I attended the Budget Overview Committee, and Lucia Jansen, as a result, or that after that meeting, put together a chart, which she got input from Megan on property damage premiums. And so I'm happy to give one of these to you. I just didn't print out enough off of my own printer. And it just shows the impact of our increase in our, and I'm sorry that Pete isn't here because Pete was involved in these email exchanges. But this shows how our premium has increased since 2019, which was $999,000 on our property damage premium. And today, or anticipated for fiscal year '24, and these are the numbers from Megan and Pete over the weekend, it's $2,592,500. So it's gone up, this year over last year, it's anticipated to go up 21%, but in this period, it's gone up 180%. And so these kind of flood events, while we do have deductible of $100,000, are nevertheless increasing the costs of our insurance substantially, and just given a 5-year period of time here. Likewise, she was working on this side of it. She sent it in this email to the committee, and but I went and I asked Megan, let's talk about the deductible also. And so the deductible in 2019 was $25,000, which continued through '21. And then we, these incidences, and our deductible is now, and this is for the flood aspect of the deductible, has now increased to $100,000, as we've just been talking about. And that is anticipated, or Megan's talking about it, whether it happens or not, again, but this is again through Pete and Megan, could be $250,000 for the deductible in fiscal year '24. And so that is an increase of 900% over the last 5 years, if that deductible turns out, and we don't know. So, I just want to point out that while it's easy to sit here and talk about deductibles, in effect, though, our insurance has gone up an additional $1.5 million plus annually over this last 5 years, and our deductible has gone up maybe as much as $225,000, depending on what happens. So I'm happy to hand this out. I'm not trying to keep this a secret. If you want one, I just only made I can give it to you afterwards.
Yeah, I'll get one.
Comment?
Would you like one of these?
No, I just want to make a comment when you're finished.
I was going to give you one. Anyway, I just wanted to make that these actions and I, I have heard it mentioned, well, gee, we don't have to worry about these kind of things, but this is why, and we had it with Nathaniel Witherall and all of the other funds at one point in time, we allocated, overhead expenses, allocated fixed charges. So, I just wanted to make this point at this point in time. So Leslie?
No, I just wanted to make a point. I am sure that Dan and Blaze would rather work on anything else but insurance claims and flooding in buildings that they don't plan for. And there have been a number of events. I think every time there is one, we talk about, how to maybe prevent the next one, right? So this, again, is an older pipe. You'd been replacing pipes in the building. It's buried in the wall. You had no idea solder was going to break. North Mariana ceiling collapse, buried in the ceiling, no idea that structure, and that would cause a problem there. I do know that this board just reduced the plumbing budget for the Board of Education based on their request in our recent budget hearing. So I'm not adding another project, but if there is a program that you think needs to be considered and implemented to address, look, you've got over 1 million square feet of space that you manage, which is by far the largest in the town, right? The town assets are not that large. So if we're going to have flooding, it's going to happen at a school building. But I think in terms of thinking about addressing problems, we often think about programs. And is the renovation of our buildings a necessary thing to do to be able to make sure our systems are updated? Or are there other actions, as you think about this, that we should be considering, implementing, funding as we go forward?
Well, I just want to add to that, there were, this is sad to say, multiple ones due to Misa's installation of HVAC system, and also there was the Coscob School. Let's face it, property insurance is to address the accidents, and that's what having insurance is all about. But if we can mitigate them or whatever, then obviously, Leslie, I agree with you. But I also want to just point out that the expense of this is not only the looking at this one deductible, it's the fact that this multiplicity of accidents could increase our property insurance by as much as, $400,000, depending on the amount, in this upcoming year, which again is a fixed charges, and it's the town pays these expenses. Laura?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple additional points. So there's no question that claims history is a driver of adjustments to insurance rates and deductibles. But there's also significant market conditions that are a factor. So our insurance has gone up across the board. And I wholeheartedly agree that anything we can do to mitigate these risks, we should absolutely implement. I'm not quite sure that we would have put a water sensor in the superintendent's office or the boardroom or the print shop, maybe because that's on the lowest level. But I don't know what the recommendation would have been. But I am a little curious to learn more about the fire alarm system, which caught this. What aspect of the fire alarm system caught the issue?
I believe it was the smoke detector in the print shop. It was either in the print shop or in the boardroom, but it failed because it got wet, it got saturated. And that allowed the alarm to go off, saying that there was trouble. That's what alerted our guys in first, and then followed, GFD was right behind it.
Well, that was most fortunate, actually, because it happening on a Saturday, who knows what would have happened had you come to work on Monday.
Right.
And, I want to add one other thing here to all of this, because I know it adds a tremendous amount of stress when these incidents happens to, particularly to Dan, who's responsible for these facilities, and, and for Tony and the team. I'm sure Joe, too. So these comments about the insurance aren't just, they're just another aspect of doing business, but there's the other side, that's the stress and the emotion that we all have, when we have something like this too. So I do feel for you when it happens. Nisha?
Yeah, no, I wanted to comment, I found this chart very helpful, Leslie, that you just sent around. I hadn't seen this.
That's because I just made it.
That's right. So while insurance rates I know are up across different industries, I'm not sure property damage would have seen this type. So this, to me, is really directly attributed to additional claims across the town. I will mention that, I don't think, to me, this is not a plumbing issue, right? So I know Ms. Moriarty just made a comment that, we decreased plumbing budget, and, comments like that I don't think are helpful. To me, this is a pure preventive kind of work that we needed to get done. I think, Dan, you mentioned that these are chillers that were decommissioned, so they needed to be offline, right? So what I'm not saying it's, one or what if it was one or one of 20 or whatnot. Flood monitors, I think, are very helpful, especially in areas of equipment. I will mention there is, in the IT server room, which is in the basement, I remember taking a tour. There's a pipe running right through the IT server room, and I remember asking Nick Michael Ting, like, what would happen if this pipe burst? Not good things. So I think we definitely need, if we don't have a flood sensor in there. Some of those are just simple preventive things, even a couple drops of condensation to pick them up. They're very inexpensive. But I'm just making this comment that I do think it's important to study this claim history, just to kind of understand things we can do proactively that are really, in my mind, preventive. So, we can always say, well, we could have had more budget to do this, and we could have had more budget to do this, and I'm not sure any of that would have necessarily helped this scenario, so we have to be honest also about assessing this particular situation. So I think it's unfortunate. I think we've definitely learned from it, and if there's another plumbing or flood issue in my time, I'm sure I'll make that comment again, but I think these are all, to me, these are things that we should learn from and take action on.
So shall we address this part of this, since this is really the, in some ways, a bit different than the print shop itself? So should we take a motion to approve ED5? Do we have a motion for
I'll
that?
make the motion to approve ED5.
And I'll second. Sorry, were you going to describe
I
it?
was going to say 545,000.
Okay, I'll second.
And,
I would say, to me, this part of it is routine. I believe that maybe the other interims may not be routine. The Board of Ed will be here anyway, but, so maybe have all of these be non-routine.
so non-routine.
Can I make a request?
Just a second. Yes.
So I would just request, Blaise referred to it earlier, it wasn't that the pipe burst, it was a pipe coupling failed. I would maybe update this sheet for the full BET's packet, and along with the updated information that you forwarded, just to make sure everyone has the most current information.
I'm sorry?
I would update the packet,
Oh.
or the full BET, to make sure we have the most current information.
Right.
That
the
was
The
emailed?
packet was put together on Wednesday, and then I think Blaise sent the information on late Thursday, close of business Thursday, shall we call it? A late close of business Thursday, and I forwarded it then. So, yes, well, Roland, we need to make sure that this package includes the updated information. So I agree with that one. So those in favor of Leslie's motion, second by Nisha? Okay. So that is 400, and that motion passes 400. So Blaise, you're not off the hook yet. And probably Dan isn't either. Unless he, oh, Dan's off the hook.
He's got somewhere to go. Okay.
Okay, so Joe's going to join at the table this time. So now we have Chair Joe Kelly joining at the table, and I don't know if I said before, I think I did say Facilities Director Dan Watson.
So, we're talking now ED6 and ED7. And so this is still part of the same incident, and we separated out the capital from the operating, like the supplies, for example, versus the equipment. And I think we could have the same issue where I circulated the information on Thursday. I don't know if everybody has it, but it's the updated supply information is in addition to the equipment. So that's the equipment plus the supplies. So we are currently so obviously during the budget process, we looked at the print shop operation. I believe Roland also looked at the print shop operation. We contacted places like CCM, who has their own print shop for members, but it's based up in New Haven. Based on the information at the time, we made staffing adjustments to the staffing model for the print shop, but not a full fundamental change to how the operation runs. Obviously, having the entire thing wiped out changes what we were looking at, and it's a different model now. What I mean by that is there's no equipment, there's no supplies, the entire room is gone, so we would be rebuilding from scratch. What we're doing at the moment, the print shop is back up and running. It started running about maybe 2 weeks ago, Jonathan, and who was the vendor in Stanford? Postnet. So we have a temporary contract with Postnet, who we shopped around. We found some people to give us pricing. They were able to give us the best pricing. It's more expensive than what the print shop would have specifically charged, as they just charge cost. Do you have the difference in the price?
It's roughly about 40 to 50% higher.
About 40 to 50% higher than the print shop, so per page. So like if we were charging 3 cents per page, which is really low to a department, we don't, all A fund departments don't bill one another labor. That's something that doesn't happen across, unless it's for something specific, like if I'm hiring Parks and Rec to do something specific, but no A fund departments bill one another. So Fleet doesn't bill the Board of Ed, A funds for their labor, just materials. We don't, print shop doesn't bill the fire department for labor. So the 3 cents was just the pure material cost. So they're about 40% higher. But what's happening is that the end user, finance was our first one, the end user doesn't see any difference. They're submitting to the print shop email. The print shop staff is formatting, doing all the things they would normally do. They agree, let's say they agree on the tabs for the budget book. Then the print shop is sending it to the company in Stanford. That company's printing it, and then we have staff going and picking it up, like maybe once a day with the volume right now, and then distributing it like they normally would if it was printed in the basement. So that's been up and running for about 2 weeks. It's going very well so far. Yeah, very well. Everything's been good. Jonathan leads the print shop, and he oversees kind of this whole operation. And him and the print shop staff and Eugene Watts, our purchasing director, set this whole concept up. So that's operating right now. We also, as a separate note, are working with the town, DPW, and Ben Branyan to see if we do rebuild the print shop, or even right now, the print shop staff are working out of the training computer lab at the Board of Ed in a meeting room. And so if there's a meeting in there, they're like sitting in the back of the meeting room doing their work. We're going to see if we can reuse the old print shop space here, relocate them out of the building, and basically move the operation back to the town, if that would be the route that we end up going. So Jonathan and the print shop team is actually meeting with Luigi and Steve O'Hurley on Monday or Tuesday, early next week. We sent them over the dimensions, both of if we rebuilt based on the equipment before you, what we would need, and then also maybe the dimensions of just some office space if we are gonna, kind of put an operation back together, but we're operating under the assumption that potentially the Board of Ed would be moving out of that building. So if we're gonna build it up from scratch either way, whether it's a hybrid model or rebuild, maybe it doesn't make sense to have it be based in that building. So those are both happening. Given that, we had come up with the draft condition, which Leslie, I think you shared with the budget committee members.
correct?
So if we were going to, the logic here is that this is one claim. We were seeking this all at one time, but the print shop appropriation would be placed in capital and it would be conditioned. It would be conditioned upon, one, us doing this analysis of the operation and deciding jointly acceptable by the BOE really and the BET, but the condition would be specifically the BET. What makes sense? If we're going to outsource, we have to explore outsourcing, do an analysis, look at the hybrid model, look at the rebuilding model, cost those out. And then based on that, coming up with an action plan, like a 5-year action plan of what's going to happen with this function for both the district and the town and all the town funds that use the print shop. And then the final condition, the final piece of that condition would be a mutually agreed upon permanent location if that was even applicable at that point.
So just let me add that the condition that at least we prepared, Blaze sent it, and Leslie commented on it, would read something like, and I think you all have it, subject to release upon review and acceptance by the BET of a report providing a financial and operational analysis of outsourcing the print shop operation, an action plan for the print shop function, and a proposed permanent location for the print shop operation if applicable.
That sounds exactly,
Sounds exactly like we've been communicating.
I
right?
think that's what we wrote, yeah.
So, there is some scenarios. So do I have any questions?
I'll give you some background on the rebuild, because I think it might answer a couple of the questions too, that people would have, that I would have. So there's two pieces. The thought, if we do rebuild, it's not rebuilding exactly what we have at the moment either. So we have 4 machines, we had 4 machines. The 3 of them were owned, 1 was leased. We don't need, based on how technology has changed, the equipment that was included in the submission it would be 3 machines. They're a little bit different. It was a little bit smaller of a footprint. And then it's also, so we'd have a little bit different of a layout. And then it's also all the supplies, so just know that we lost like all of the copy paper, we lost all the ink cartridges, furniture in that room. We're keeping that furniture request separate. So this would be specifically, this is the one that is all the costs to get it back up and running. If we were gonna do, what it's assuming at the moment though would be a total, that number is a total rebuild of keeping the in-house function of the print shop.
So may I just understand one point here? If, say, the print shop were moved to the town hall, there is sufficient funds here that would cover any kind of redo of that space so that there wouldn't be an additional requested appropriation. You would be able to prepare the space for this equipment. I don't know if this is the right words to use.
Yeah.
You will have the right electrical there, whatever, within the costs of what you're proposing here. No additional, if it were to move to town hall and if it were to be a full print shop, the information you have provided would take care of the costs of rebuilding it in whatever location, Havemeyer or town hall. Is that a correct statement, or does it need to be adjusted?
It's a good question, and I believe the answer is yes. I think we're meeting, we've sent over to Luigi and Steve all the specifications for the equipment, the power requirements. So far, everything seems to be okay, but Jonathan and Wilkie, the print manager, and Jonathan Sopranowitz are doing the actual walkthrough with them next week. I don't see fundamentally any major rebuild that needs to
so
occur
if there's
outside of
any-
what we're talking about.
If there's any changes between now and Monday evening, or if you go back and just, do this additional checking.
Yeah.
And just be prepared to respond if there's any changes from what we're talking about now on Monday evening.
question.
Does that
Yep.
sound reasonable?
It does. It does.
Laura?
So I'm fine with this condition. I think this works. My only question is, I heard a little ambiguity about the equipment itself. Has it not been turned on? Has it been tested? Has it been totaled? What's the status of the insurance claim?
It's a good question. So there's less certainty at the moment. It is an ambiguous status. Megan could probably answer it better than I can, but at the moment, our understanding is that it was in a few feet of water, all the equipment. It's been moved out, cleaned, and abated for the asbestos. When the insurance company sent out a subcontractor, I think called Tech Loss, that company came to see the equipment. They never turned any of the equipment on or brought their own power supply. So none of it was turned on or tested. That company gave the insurance company a very inconclusive report on the equipment. One that was inconclusive enough that Chubb, I think his name's Evan, was unable to still make a determination. What they're now looking for is for someone, maybe for us to bring out, we had to send them our lease agreement. We sent them our service contract that we have to maintain those. They wanted us to bring out someone to see if service could be done on the equipment and to try to turn them on. That is kind of, I would say, where it's at the moment, where it's still inconclusive on those pieces of machinery. I don't think they've made a determination yet, which is another reason for delaying the implementation. One of the challenges that we had, especially originally, was that the regular service provider didn't want to come out and do it because we couldn't confirm that, one, the equipment was safe to use. The first time we called them, it was before we had it abated, so there was asbestos exposure, so they weren't gonna, the regular Canon service person's not gonna come out. And then now the question has been who provides the power to test the equipment? Because our current facilities department hasn't wanted to plug it into the normal power in the building. They want the
All right, so
service contractor
I'm going to stop you because I think we're getting into the weeds.
Okay, yeah,
But
okay,
my
yeah.
only point is, if to the extent the equipment is not replaced, in other words, if somebody determines that the equipment is functioning, I think that would have to be part of the action plan.
Yes,
Correct.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah, okay,
thank you.
that is a much shorter and fairer way to put it, yeah. Sorry.
Just falling asleep.
Nisha?
Couple questions. I'm just clarifying this for the public if they're listening in. The print shop is for the town and the Board of Ed. Do they handle all print supplies? So 2 fact questions. How many employees work in the print shop?
2.7.
2.7, okay. And the volume of printing? Like how much are we printing? You said and I'm looking at this I was just quickly doing the math because you said 3 cents and 4.5 cents or, whatever, 5 cents. What kind of volume are we talking? Daily, weekly, annual, whatever number you want to give me?
Do you have the report with you?
We've had about 65 print jobs in the last 3 months.
In terms, I guess when you think about, you can give it to me in terms of budget if you want. I can back into it. And the reason I mention is quick back of the spreadsheet calculation while you're talking. If it's 3 cents versus 4, I'm assuming the 4.5 cents or 5 cents that you commented includes the labor component. The 3 cents you clearly pointed out does not
That's our
include the
charge,
labor,
yes.
right? Just the cost of the print. Even if unless you're printing even if you're printing 5 million, 10 million sheets of paper per annum, that's like 75 to 100,000 incremental cost.
Yes.
So I think just a very simple kind of, if we're paying a penny more for every million, it's 10 grand or something. I guess this will come out in the analysis that you're going to do in terms of outsourcing or not outsourcing. But I think just when I saw this, and I remember thinking about this a year ago when I'm like, who has a print shop, right? I thought we were I never liked paper. I always try to avoid paper altogether. And just kind of the way we're moving, right, as a society, we want less paper. We want to encourage departments to not have paper, like I certainly don't know what this is, but I probably wouldn't want it, you know what I mean? So if we're thinking about it going forward and we're moving away from this, is this something that you're also thinking about? Like who's making the decision of, I heard Ben is going to be involved in it, Ben Brannion. Are we, as the BT, going to be involved in that? I'm sorry, the condition probably
We
came
are going
around.
to, we are going to get a report, and then, so we will have that option to consider the report, evaluate the report.
Are we going to evaluate the report, or are you
Well,
making the
there'll be a
decision?
condition on the release of the funds, so, you know,
Make a
it,
recommendation.
They're making a recommendation. So Ben
Right.
is, you're working with Ben to
it
make a
says,
recommendation? Do you have that?
acceptance by the BET of a report providing a financial and operational analysis of outsourcing for the print shop operation, an action plan for the print shop function, and a proposed permanent location for the print shop operation if applicable. So yes, we would get to see the report and opine on it, and if you chose not to proceed with the plan, you have the option of not releasing the funds.
You're.
Oh, we, the BET. I
Yes.
mean, not just you. It would be one of,
And you're thinking of, it's why we mentioned that the model changed from the last time we looked
Yeah.
at it. $275,000 would go a long way in a number
Right.
of copies. That's the intent of doing the analysis. The board, the Board of Ed is also interested in first receiving the report and reviewing the recommendation and being satisfied with the direction. They want us to explore the cost, and something that Joe has indicated specifically is the cost of the equipment, how many pages, that type of piece is what he wants us to look at it now that the model looks fundamentally different.
Is the largest user the Board of Ed for the print shop? Because in terms of the departments,
So just for clarity, you have to remember that about 5 or 6 years ago, we consolidated the town's function was consolidated.
yeah, no, I think it's great
with
that we
the
have
BOE.
one. I'm just trying to understand. like,
Yeah,
what-
I
who's the
actually
large-
think
what's
we
the largest
recently
department?
did, I'll send, so before you have it, before Monday night, I'll send you we have a volume report, and I think we also broke down recently town versus BOE volume, right?
Yeah, as of the last 2 weeks, we've had 62 jobs, 47 from the town,
Yeah.
so mostly town jobs.
Happens to be a big town time right now. Parks and Rec does all their printing, and then also I think the biggest user might be the finance department, to be honest, with the budget books. But
We the biggest
there's a
user?
lot of versions that get swapped out. But I think we have most of that and some historical information. So before Monday,
Yeah.
we had the same questions. I'll share
I
with
guess
the
my
four
point
of
is,
you.
it's not a very complicated analysis that we're talking about here. It's a very simple.
I would say
I-
that we're not talking a highly in-depth, a complicated analysis. So, yeah.
so I'd just like to make a comment. Laura made the comment about the justification of the request, the wording. And I would just have you look at number 6 and number 7 also, because there's a statement in there, it looks like it's really for the flood part of it, not for the printing shop part of it. So you might just get rid of the sentence that says, this is the estimate, and substitute something that's more appropriate in both of these, that relates to the print shop.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it
not
says
going to make any
exclude-
difference to what we do today, but,
Yeah, it
you
says
know, for,
excluding print shop equipment.
yeah. And then we're going to attach the right exhibits for the purpose of Monday's package. Leslie?
Yeah, also for Monday night, and this may be more for Megan than it is for the Board of Education, but I think it would be great if we could have better clarity on the insurance proceeds. In the sense, I know that we don't know the status of the equipment, but are we paid on replacement cost of what we reinstall, or is it replacement cost of the existing equipment? Or is it just the depreciated value of the existing equipment? So I think I'm not clear on
Pretty sure it's
exactly.
replacement cost. but
When we
clearly-
asked,
Replacement cost
yeah,
of the existing equipment. So if
When we
they
asked Megan-
redesign. Go ahead.
I think when we asked Megan that question, it would be if we rebuilt, it would, and they determine that it's lost, it would be the new equipment. If we don't rebuild, we would get the payout of the depreciated value of the current equipment. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay.
Let's ask Megan for
So-
clarification.
Yeah.
So who, you're going to ask Megan and let Roland and Pete know, or copy them or something? Is
Yeah,
that-
and it would probably
what's
be
that
helpful if
process for
Megan came.
responding?
Yeah.
We can
Okay.
ask
I would invite Megan to the
directly.
meeting.
She works for us, really. But, maybe she can put in writing exactly how this policy will work in this particular instance.
I know, but I just think for Blaze to keep the package together, it would probably be helpful if Blaze, you can copy anyone, but if you do that, and then copy certainly Pete
Yeah,
and
yeah, I
Roland,
can-
so that we,
Yes.
So,
Okay.
sorry, just to tag on to that question, in terms of business interruption insurance, are we covered for what we're doing now with this firm in Stamford? Do you have any idea?
She advised us to track all the expenses so that we can submit the difference
Very good, thank you.
in the expense to insurance. And then, yeah, I mean, it would be, I think what Megan is our risk manager as well. It's a consolidated function. I think even building on this conversation and the conversation we were having before, it's something that we're going to look to build the relationship, get Megan out in all the schools, have her come to walk through all of our facilities. She's also our risk manager. And so I think it would be very helpful if she was getting out, coming into the facilities, doing a risk program for the Board of Ed as well. And I think that's something that we'd be looking forward to. Dan's already talking to her about, and then also they work very well together. Unfortunately, they have a lot of practice doing it. But yeah, some clarity with Megan, maybe at the meeting would be helpful.
And I don't know whether we're going to go into depth on the printing supplies, the next, the separated out one, but clearly understanding how insurance handles that piece as well would be helpful.
Would be, yes. Yep.
Blaze, you're comfortable handling that? I mean, the two
Yeah,
just
yeah,
directly
I'll
with Megan?
I'll send the email, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, great, thanks.
You may have to ask her to be there Monday. I don't know if I can do that, but I would suggest that she comes.
Okay, so we'll, Roland, can you note that too? And,
It's Monday the 17th.
right.
Monday.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, I would just clarify, if Megan can answer the questions in an email, I don't know if we need to see her in person, but that, I mean, I'm comfortable getting the answer in whatever form, it's fine with me.
Harry?
Yes.
This week, I know she is. Right. As did I from my chart. Okay, so are we ready? Do we have any motions?
Do we,
Are you still
so
have questions?
this particular request is saying it's capital non-recurring. This is more capital costs for equipment. And I guess as you responded to Leslie's question previously, whatever building improvement costs might be needed for whatever room you occupy. Your room is going to be flexible, can handle it, but if it comes to Havemeyer, you have to, potentially, you may have some expenses to get the room updated for whatever the current needs are. And that 235 from capital non-recurring, your estimate is you think it covers all costs to create a print shop if that is,
Between the
the
two,
outcome.
we can rebuild the print shop,
okay, so I'll take that.
if that's
So,
the direction we go.
So I'll make the motion to approve D6 interim appropriation for $235,000, the source being capital non-recurring.
Are we adding the
Are you
condition?
going to read, or do you want?
Yes,
the-
and
the-
including the condition which reads, upon review and acceptance by the BET of a report providing a financial and operational analysis of outsourcing the print shop operation, an action plan for the print shop function, and a proposed permanent location for the print shop operation if applicable.
Okay,
I don't have the wording, but it says a report for the print shop function or the operation. I would assume that includes the equipment, just to make sure that that is included.
Yeah, you can't have a print shop operation without, well, if the proposal is not to do it without equipment, that will be included.
so you should have it there, Laura.
It came in an email on April 6th at 10.
Yeah, no, I have
Okay.
it. I'm just making sure,
Yep.
Okay, so those in favor of that motion?
Was there a second?
Anisha seconded
You
it.
did, sorry.
Oh,
I
did you?
didn't, but I'll do it now. I'll
I
second it.
thought
No, I was asking.
I wrote that down. You said first, and then she added the.
No, I was
condition.
asking the condition. Yeah.
Are you okay, seconding?
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, those in favor? So, so that's 400. I'm sorry?
No, I was off the cuff remark.
Do we have a motion for ED7? That's the supplies
Well,
needed.
let's, I just,
is this general fund?
yeah, the question is really
Their
the source of
supplies
the
are
funding.
operating versus the other is capital.
Well, the others.
No, the other is a refurbishment of
Sorry,
capital.
I'm sorry, I'm just
It's supplies.
I don't wanna
There's a
get
separate
in the morass of
This
the
is
accounting.
Roland's accounting.
that
Roland
same
and Blaze
February
and
6th
Pete worked on
email
this,
is a chart
and this
of the
is what they came
supplies
up
in
with.
detail.
The three, with
That's-
Roland, do you
look
want to
at that
add to that?
email
That's, you and
from
Blaze
Leslie.
worked on the accounting, and this is the way it should be.
This is the supplies that went, it's not a capital item, and they're gonna need to buy paper.
And printing ink
Yeah, no,
cartridges.
I understand. That's why I
insurance?
wasn't sure about the first one, about the flood emergency. But again, I'm going to leave the accounting to the
Well,
finance staff.
My only question is if it's covered by insurance, the proceeds are going into capital non-recurring, or are you going to split the proceeds for these
Well-
supplies that were lost?
Well, the supplies,
Wouldn't it be easier just to have everything coming out of capital non-recurring if it's being covered by an insurance claim?
That's capital, and this is operating.
well, usually, I mean, capital non-recurring is for capital
Capital.
projects.
So you'll split the insurance
If we- if-
proceeds
okay,
to cover this?
If
Because
we can split it, we'll split it. Yeah, okay.
So,
I'm sorry, wouldn't this require the same condition?
Right, we probably should have the same condition
That we
on here,
just-
right, Leslie?
No, I
I'm not
don't think you
sure
can
it
have the
does.
condition, because they need the money now.
For supplies. You need the money now
I mean,
for
the
supplies,
print shop
Blaze?
is working,
No,
except,
but, no, they're outsourcing everything, so they're
But they have
not
to pay
supplying
for-
the paper.
but they have to pay for it.
So Blaze, will you clarify for us, please? Because this is your operation.
But that's at cost, right? Go ahead, sorry. Yeah.
We're trying to figure out, do you need any of this money now, or should it be conditioned?
You know,
No, I mean, it has to be, Joe, come on.
Well, we're getting reimbursed, but we have to pay the current provider of the services. So it's just one pocket to the other, right?
Yeah, but the 40,000, there's like 20,000 of furniture in here, for example, or 15,000 of furniture. There's some of this is
We-
equipment setup.
when we submitted it, we submitted it originally as one, and I would have conditioned it all together. At the moment, the cost is being borne by every department individually. So finance, for example, is paying a higher cost than they would have. It's being
So-
JV'd, so
I think we condition it, and then we'll just, if we learn more later on that we need to release it, we'll release it.
I
So
just
do-
want to be clear. Now I'm confused. So this is just supplies. This is paper,
paper.
binding. This is not equipment.
It's in that email again, Laura. I don't know, I just opened
it's,
it
well,
up.
this one,
It's a bunch of
there's
stuff.
two.
Yeah.
So
All
we,
right,
when
You're
we
going to
had
have to walk me through this because I didn't get all these emails.
Okay. So we originally submitted it as one for 275,000. We then, Roland and I met, we came up with charging the 235 to capital. That one has the backup for the equipment. I believe that, so the 235, this one, should be this piece of paper. This goes with the 235. Okay. And then the 40,000 separately would be this one, which I don't know if you have.
I found an email.
Do you have this one?
haven't looked at it.
Okay.
So let me just,
I have it.
these things all come in
Here, I have
different-
Yeah, this is
a,
why we
I
put
have
the
it.
packet together.
I have, I just told you I don't like paper.
All right, I'll
Talking
keep it,
about
'cause I
print
think it's
shop.
my copy. So,
I just want to clarify, our packages were out on
Wednesday.
Wednesday, and this came in Thursday evening after
Yeah,
everything
probably like
closed.
7:30, 8 o'clock.
Right, and
Yep.
then I forwarded it shortly thereafter to my colleagues, et cetera. So, we operated with a long weekend, and this is where we are.
Yeah, no, I think we're not, we met with, I think Roland and I are pretty much on the same page here. The difference between the two, so we broke them out and we moved some of this stuff to operating. So the 235 is primarily the equipment and then the big machines and then like the related like equipment that they had in there, like the presses and the laminating stuff. The 40,000 would be this one. This is also what we're working on, which is why Megan would be helpful to have for the question. But this is all an inventory of everything. This is why it took a little longer to get. This is also what we're submitting to insurance, a more detailed version of this. But this is all the supplies, paper, ink, equipment, not equipment, I shouldn't use that word, folders, all that stuff. That is currently about $23,000. Okay. And then on top of that, we have some of the furniture, shelving, you know, ancillary items that go along, table to put back a full operation. That comes out to about 37,000. That's the 40,000. We put that one in operating, and we put the equipment in capital, non-recurring. That's how, so the 40,000 is to like kind of, is the materials, equipment, materials and furniture. And then the 235, the bulk of that would be the machines and then the actual like equipment for the print shop operation.
So I absolutely support the accounting that you and Roland have worked out. The question here is, do we put a condition on this? And I would say it should have the condition that that was the original plan, to put the condition on the whole thing. We now have the right accounting, so we can always release the condition if we find that we need to do something different. So
I would agree
do
on
I
that.
have a motion?
I just want to be sure, bearing in mind the conversation we had at the top of the hour, when the meeting started about the spending freeze. So if you're printing things for back to school before the end of school for next year to be prepared, I want to be sure, maybe some of it could be conditioned, and I don't want to overcomplicate this, it's $40,000, but do you need the $23,000 for supplies to cover what you need to do for printing between now and the end of the year in your operating accounts?
Well, that's for all the departments, right? So this would be, if
That's for all the departments.
Board of Ed, it could be de minimis per department. I don't think this is something that.
Well, no, I'm asking about their needs for the Board of Ed. I understand this finance is busy time, but I'm thinking that prior to June, they start planning for back to school. And I'm asking the question, I don't know the answer. Given that you've frozen spending as of March 20th, I want to be sure that you have what you need to operate through the end of the year.
So I propose that we accept this as it's presented, and that Blaze, Dr. Jones, Mr. Kelly, whoever, I'm sorry, Jonathan, can all talk about this, and if we need any adjustments on Monday night, please advise us over the next couple of days, and those adjustments will be made. But I think this package had a lot of thought over the last couple of weeks. Blaze has been working with Roland, so, to talk about supplies of 23,000 when it's for the entire town, I just don't know. So
I appreciate where you're coming from, and I have a shared feeling of stress about the overall budget, but I would say for this piece specifically, at this point, we would keep this as one request, and I would just keep them together like we originally submitted. And then, based on how we started talking about this at the start of the meeting, if we have more information by Monday, yes, and then, but specifically, as we get a better idea of where our budget is, and if we can, come up with some decisions or maybe some possibility to unfreeze, as we already talked about, we would come back maybe to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, as painful as that might sound to me, no offense, but if I got to come back for another one, we would come back maybe for the overall condition, once I have a better understanding of specifically where the budget is at.
Leslie?
I know that this is just presentation, but to me, it makes it more confusing to separate ED6 and ED7. We could have handled this in one document and just have two different funding sources for two different uses of the funds, and then one condition on it. It might be easier to present it that way to the full BET. I get that we have it separated right now, but I think it makes it a little bit more confusing.
So Roland, what do you think about that? I'm not going to put this on Blaze's shoulder. What do you think about Leslie's suggestion?
It's just
I think we just leave it the way
presentation,
it is. Do I have a motion to approve this with this exactly identical condition?
So moved.
So Nisha moves that we approve this with the identical condition that we had on ED6. Do I have a second for that motion?
but I'll second.
So Nisha moved. Leslie Moriarty seconded. Those in favor? 400. They're all unanimous. Yep, it took a long time,
That
but
last
we
comment, I was with you.
thank you so much.
I was with
We
you
thank
until
you
the
very
last
much for your
comment.
time. And, you know, I know that anything like this is very stressful, and I know, Dr. Jones, you're anxious to get back into your office. Do you have any estimated time frame?
Another month or
I think about a month and a half or 2 months, I would say. Yeah.
So I'm assuming this covers any personal items you may have lost.
Sorry. The good thing is, and the bad thing, is that my office didn't have the water intrusion. It's because it was right next to the conference room, and it has to do with just, it was all one room. So do I feel ultra comfortable knowing that in my ceiling there's asbestos and in the floor? Probably not. And I'm going to go back into that space. But the intrusion of the water didn't come under the floor or the ceiling. And the same thing happened with Ann Carabillo, who is just on the other side. She's been displaced as well, our deputy. But the water intrusion, there is actually like a metal, I forget what it is, a pipe or something, that runs along the wall that kept the water from going underneath. But because they were doing all of this work, they've had to displace us as well. But we were very, very fortunate. And to be honest, I just have to say, we were incredibly fortunate that this was not 50 feet in the other direction, or it would have taken out that entire tech space that we've talked about the last 2 years. So we were really very lucky. It wasn't worse. But yeah, I'll get my office back in a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Blaze.
thanks to Roland.
Thank you.
For working together and also meeting with us, you know, and kind of going through a partnership on this. I think it was very helpful. So thank you, everybody.
And thank you to Jonathan, too, who's been patiently sitting in the back. So we have our Assistant Fire Chief, Charlie Lewicki, who has been patiently sitting there for an hour and 20 minutes while we discussed the unfortunate flooding accident at the Habermeyer Building. So, what you have is a need for,
Yes, I'm just looking for a transfer within the 208 volunteer account. For the last couple of years, we've been running on 3 to 5 volunteers, taking advantage of the healthcare plan. In January, that number went up to 8. Obviously raises the town share amount, and it will put us into the negative, which is why we're asking for the $10,000 transfer from the pro services account.
do you have any questions? Laura?
I think this is good news, that you need more money because we have more volunteers who are electing for healthcare coverage. So I have no questions on this item. But just a note to the chair, we still have an outstanding item with the fire department for release of conditions from our fiscal '23 budget. So at some point, we need to
Where-
schedule that.
We're aware of that. Well, we've been waiting on a report, which really relates to the entire department. And I think you know that the money was released 2 or 3 months ago. I have the exact date and the exact amount, but we will have the release of conditions. I think I was inquired, and Leslie was copied too, of Ben, and I think they're finalizing the report, right? Is that?
We have a meeting with town administration tomorrow.
Right, so they're working on that, so that should happen in May. But in the meantime, the volunteers do have their money. Nisha, did you have a question?
Yep, two quick questions. One is can you just remind me what the healthcare covers for volunteers? When we say, it's obviously a very small number. What does that mean? Yeah.
So, I dabble in knowing a little bit of IT, a little bit of this. I really don't know much about healthcare. So, it's something that's offered to the volunteers. There is a plan coordinator. It's not the same plan, through Human Resources. I believe they're Anthem Blue Cross plans. The town plays a 25% share. And if anyone says they're interested, I literally take that person, put them, with the plan administrator to figure out what they need, and then we get the bill, and then we put it through. That's really all I know
Okay.
about. There's
No, that's-
multiple different plans available.
No,
and-
that was really good. So the town covers the 25%.
Yes.
And then, okay, so that's
And
good.
I will add, it's only for the individual, not a family plan.
Got it. Yeah, no, then the numbers make sense.
Yes.
All right, so then the second question was, are more individuals jumping on the program because there's increased number of volunteers, or just that the number of, they're more, from the current base? We haven't seen an increase in volunteers.
No.
It's just that there are more individuals from within your volunteer base that are taking,
Yeah,
that are taking you up on it.
the three that are joining or joined in the last 6 months, I believe, two of them are newer volunteers, so they're probably just taking advantage of it. But a lot of it, the number from talking to the administrator, it does kind of go up and down with people because it depends if they're self-employed or what the current market rate is, and they kind of jump on and off. So the number kind of fluctuates a lot depending on what it is. In May, I did note in the letter too, the rates change in May, so then we might see something change in May where people jump off and go back to their town, their own plan. So
Got it. Thank you.
kind of fluid.
Any more questions?
I just want to clarify, because I thought at a previous meeting, you said you were processing, I want to say close to 20 applications for new volunteer firefighters, but maybe I got that number wrong.
Yes.
You have been, right? So we have seen an uptick in volunteer applications.
We see about the same amount, it looks like, for the last couple of years. I've only been, hands-on involved for the last year. It seems like there's around 20 every year, and it seems that maybe 10% you end up seeing through. I'd say, let me rephrase that. You probably get like 25% for maybe a year or so, and then it drops off, where your long-term is usually 5 to 10% that stick around.
Leslie?
This is more a general question to your budget, since you're here, and last year we saw you here because you needed to fund, because typically you have a very tight budget.
Yes.
And your overtime expense is always, vacillates, and certainly is at a higher level than it had been historically because of issues within the department. But just wondering, so the $10,000 you're covering, you're moving, then it could not have been covered, well, it's in 700. I'm wondering if it could have been covered elsewhere. How's the rest of your budget look as you're going into the end of the year?
You'll probably see me for some other things with overtime and some other expenses.
Next month?
Yes. But however, this we could not cover from within because it was a 700 level account, so we had to do that. There was also a little bit of a shortage in one of the other volunteer accounts as well, but it's in the 100, so it'll be able to cover right there. That was for the physicals because all career and volunteer had a full physical with a stress test, so it kind of ran higher than what we were expecting.
Yeah, thank you.
Nisha?
Just thought of one more question. Do volunteers need to complete a certain number of, meaning do you track, like, for example, monthly hours or annual hours? I'm just thinking from a benefit standpoint, if we're spending $3,000 or $4,000 per month per volunteer.
So I believe we have a standard operating procedure, and I don't know where it lives, but there is some kind of document, whether it's in the charter or proclamation, I don't know where it is, that says that they have to do a certain amount of hours per quarter to be able to be eligible for the healthcare. Just like they need to, for a tax payment, there has to be 240 hours of time put in, broken up different ways, and it's all tracked.
Right, and I'll just add, I think this is a great benefit to give to volunteers, and I think it might be, I don't know if you use this at all to market or to incent individuals to join the volunteer force, but I'm glad you're tracking it, and there's some process to make sure that the right individuals are getting it. But I think you mentioned this last year too, and I just had forgotten that this was a nice benefit. I think it's a great benefit to offer. And if we don't do enough to market it, I think maybe it's something,
Well, I think it's something that definitely helps, because I think there are a lot of people who do work from home or are 1099 self-contractors in Greenwich, so it's definitely a benefit to being a volunteer in town and kind of offering some of those costs of having to pay your own healthcare by yourself.
Yeah, no, I'll say one of the, just having been part of a business that used to manage some of the healthcare for employees, one of the most difficult things that individuals have when they are self-employed or they're doing things on their own is to acquire healthcare. So just access to it is sometimes difficult. So it's great that you're covering 25%, but also just providing a line into, and it's you meaning the fire department, but as a town, we're also covering it. But I think it's a great benefit, and just 2 cents, my 2 cents.
So do I have a motion to approve this?
I'll make a motion to approve $10,000 transfer.
And I'll second.
Those in favor? So 400, that motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I guess we'll see you soon. It may not be May. Oh, I'm sorry. This is routine.
As routine.
Routine, so you don't need to come again.
Thank you.
We'll see you before year end, I guess, maybe June, huh?
Has to be before.
I'm sorry?
It's better if it's May, so it goes to the June RTM.
That's the best. But I know that the chief will be working with Roland. He's learned a lot about our budgeting process over his time with us, haven't you? And you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we get to Roland's show. We're going to talk about the economic conditions. And actually, Roland, we haven't talked about this over the last month or two because our meetings have been so early in the month. And in fact, even this month it was early, and so it wasn't originally in the package. However, we have gotten them by email sometime. And Roland, would you like to review, please?
Okay, if we look at our big 3 items there, conveyance tax continues to trend behind the last few years, but it's still doing pretty well. We should certainly make budget. Building permits is on par with the last few years, and they'll exceed budget. And of course, interest is going up and up and up. We'll probably be well over at least $6 million by the end of the year.
So, Roland, I will comment, though, that the conveyance taxes are actually stronger than the pre-COVID years. It's just that the COVID years themselves, well, I guess we had a lot of people trying to escape New York.
Right.
So, moving on.
And again, for the whole revenue item, we're kind of where we were last year. Interest is 4 million higher, taxes are 9, and it's offset by the conveyance. Bridge and CMAQ money is down from last year. And just some ins and outs. So we're 9 million ahead of where we were a year ago. And school lunch seems to be doing well. They're getting a lot more money in.
I know that we don't take our revenues and budget them by month, but are we running on track to meeting the budgeted revenue number for the year? Do you have a
I think
sense?
it's because we're comparing last year's March year-to-date to March year-to-date. On the expense side, fire department is up. One of the things, in addition to overtime, they have over $300,000 of sick and vacation payouts to the retirees that they've had. You've heard the fire department talk a lot about how many retirees they have and how they have backfill with overtime and things like that until they get out of the academy. So of that differential, 300 is sick and vacation, which will be transferred into the fixed charge line before the end of the year.
I was going to say, that can get moved out of their
Yes.
operating budget into the fixed charges.
And we have,
So when they come in for an interim, if they still need it, well, they'll be aware of that impact.
yeah, right. And then, police, of course, most of that is due to the additional Board of Education security work that they're doing. The Board of Education,
But I just like to point on, particularly the police, that's up 20% year over year. That's, and I do realize it's the security work, but it's still up 20%. 19.5 if we want to be accurate, but that's substantial.
and then everybody, there's $1.8 million of capital that we put into the operating budget that we didn't have a year ago. And
That's a good point.
some of that, if you annualize it, it's about $1.2 million. Some of it is police, Board of Education, Public Works. And on the Board of Education, we're talking about the $1 million of sped that's over budget. Another $1 million for the flood damage that's still in the general fund right now. So we haven't supplemented that yet.
So, and, the Board of Ed is up about 3.5%, so not as much as some other departments. Public Works is about 4%. I guess what these are small numbers, but the RTM is up 233%. And the Historic District Commission, don't ask me why, is up 500%.
Yeah, the RTM is up, remember we had the.
No, I
move money
know,
around for electronic voting.
but nevertheless, I mean, you're talking about last year-to-date, spending 15,000, and this year spending 50.
And-
It really, I mean, electronic voting, you'd think would be less expensive. Instead, it's turned out to be much more expensive with all the additional people they need to track it.
And just the Public Works alone is $565,000 of capital that went to operating, which accounts for most of their overages.
Also tipping, I
That
think.
leaves employee benefits, which, it's healthcare, primarily healthcare and OPEB.
So do you think we're going to be okay at year-end, Roland? Using up more of fund balance?
We're going to be okay. I forgot what our budget was for the general fund, so we'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a really
I
quick?
think the one other area I noticed is, this is no surprise to us, but it is, according to this, Nathaniel Witherall spending $1.8 million more than they did last year at this time on their $21.2 million budget. Nisha?
This is on the revenue side. I'm sorry, I was looking for my notes on this. On state and federal grants, it's on page, I think, 15. The last, or the second to last and the third to last, the Housing Authority, 365K, and the pilot tax exempt properties, 925. Is that the Housing Trust? And
No,
what-
these are pilot payments. These are the payment in lieu of, and they're difficult to budget, right, Roland? Because we never know when they're going to get.
What, I'm sorry, what are they? So. for
Payment in
example,
lieu of taxes from the state.
Payment in. Oh, okay. And then what about the 365? The Housing Authority lot?
That's the Housing Authority, and it has nothing to do with the Affordable Housing Trust.
It doesn't.
This is the Housing Authority that manages a number of the housing projects in town.
Greenwich Communities, right?
Yeah.
So, and they didn't get any money last year, or?
We don't get the money until they're finished with their audit. It comes in kind of lumpy sometimes. Sometimes we get 2 years at a time.
Got it, okay.
Or 3 or 4, sometimes, it depends on when they get their own books done.
Do we get that audit circulated to BET members? They do a formal audit?
They do.
I would be interested in seeing that. I don't know if anyone else would be, but. I would.
Okay. Thank you, Roland. So all's good, right, Roland? For now. What do you mean for now?
Just waiting for the next flood.
Okay, well, as long as it isn't in town hall.
Roland's trying to close out our fiscal '22 audit. That's his task.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve our March 9th regular meeting minutes?
I'll make that motion.
No second?
Those in favor? 400. Do we have any other minutes we'd like to put on the agenda?
I haven't had a chance to look at what was sent out yesterday, so.
Which
I'd
is
rather
understandable, but, here's my point on those minutes. They're decision day minutes, and, those votes really should have been posted within a certain amount of time. So I would suggest posting them as draft minutes for this packet.
Okay.
And then we can take action at our next meeting. A comment was made on our full BET decision day that some of the votes people should have anticipated because of the 2-2 votes on our decision day. But unless you were watching live or at our meeting, you wouldn't necessarily have known what those votes were. So I really think it's important that we, for transparency, put the draft up.
Put the
And,
drafts up.
and perhaps we can have a list of what's been approved and not approved on the budget.
Okay.
On the prior meetings that we've had. And I want to make another suggestion for a potential agenda item, if I can, and that is to maybe have a lessons learned conversation at our May meeting about how to change, modify, improve, make more efficient our budget process
Okay.
in reviewing the budget.
I think that's always a good process. So that'd be a new agenda item.
Yep.
Okay. Any motions to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, so. Those in favor? Okay, so 400 adjourned at 2:43. We started at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.